All right, we are live. Hello, everyone, and happy Wednesday if you're watching this on the day that we're doing it or if you're joining us live. We are here in She Built This for a She Built This Live and Learn, though I think some people pronounce them live and learn. It could really go anyway. It's a play on words. And I'm talking today with Jessica Terzakis. We're going to be talking about how to uncomplicate your message and make things really clearly communicated to your ideal audience, because we are all trying to increase the amount of people that want to work with us and are excited to work with us. And the way that we do that is through really clear communication about who we are and what we do and how we help them. So with that, Jessica, I always like to start because, I can read 100 words or less, but that doesn't tell us everything that there is to know about you. So why don't you tell us in your own words who you are and how you help people with content?
Hey everyone, I'm so excited to be here. I am Jessica Terzakis, and my specialty is helping service-based entrepreneurs like coaches or consultants or anyone who's an authority or expert basically take what's in their head and turn that into a product or a program that they can sell. So it's essentially you make money. I show you how to make money out of the things that you are an expert in. So that often ends up looking like an online course or a group coaching program. And I got into that from being a high school teacher for 6 years, where I taught like 500. This is my claim to fame. I taught 500 14 and 15-year-olds. So if I could teach an audience of 14 and 15-year-olds how to be better writers, how to be better communicators, like I felt like I could teach entrepreneurs a thing or two about that too.
I think they probably say you can take the teacher out of the school, but you can't take the school out of no, vice versa.
You can't take the teacher out of the classroom, right? That whole thing.
Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. This is going off the rails. All right. So one thing I've been thinking a lot about recently is how, not just as entrepreneurs, as women professionals and as entrepreneurs and as business owners, no matter what you call yourself, the one thing that we all have in common is this need to create content, right? Because it comes in so many forms, in so many ways. And I think a lot of times people just think content is like social media post or maybe producing a podcast or sending an email. So I'm curious to hear what you see as like an area of confusion when it comes to messaging and content. Like, where do you see people getting tripped up the most?
I would say I see people getting tripped up in the sense that I guess the best way to put it is I think people feel like they have to approach content from, let me show off how smart I am, let me show off how much I know with my content, as opposed to looking at content from the perspective of, especially when I'm talking about like social media and putting yourself out there, your primary job with content is to create an emotional connection with people. And I think that is the place where people get really tripped up, because then that's Emily, when people feel like they're just speaking into the void and they're just saying, well, I feel like I'm just saying what everyone else is saying. Hi, Gail. So good that you're joining us today. So when people approach content from a, let me show how smart I am, let me show off how much I know, let me tell you how to do A, B, and C steps in your business and your health and your whatever, as opposed to let me create an emotional connection and show that I understand what you're going through, that's the biggest mistake.
Yeah. So how do you think, like, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you think we kind of got here, because I will say, I do think that that has a place, right? I think that showing ourselves as the expert and sharing our knowledge and information has a place. But you're so right that and I see people do this a lot, where they rely really heavily on that piece of content and forget that there's like, many, many other categories and other ways of creating a connection with people. And also, even in that educational piece, you can still be creating a connection, right? So where do you think we kind of got ourselves up craps creek, so to speak, with doing this, where we're just like, I need to show myself as an expert, I need to be teaching, and missing that connection piece?
Well, I think you bring up a great point. I don't say this as like we're just all egotistical and want to show off. I don't think that's the perspective. I think it's more like I want to help people, right? And so that desire to help, that desire to say like, well, I know people are going through this. I know the solution. Like I have this really great skill set. I have this really great process, and I know this can serve so many people. I want to give that. I want to put that out there. I think that's where a lot of people. I think that's how we got here, and I think that especially heightened with COVID, when we all went online and we were all forced to position ourselves on social media in a lot of ways. And we were like, well, I know people are struggling right now. Let me show them what to do. And that's when we got into this loop of like, where people are like, I don't want to read one more time, like the 3 steps to doing blah, blah, blah for dinner, right? I don't want to read one more time how to meditate at night. I think people are exhausted by information now. And now I think there's this opportunity for us as entrepreneurs to course correct and say, okay, information is everywhere. People can Google stuff. My primary job as a content creator, whether it's in paid programming, whether it's in marketing, I need to create an emotional connection to my followers and build a relationship with them.
Yeah, so how do we do that? Like what's the flip side here?
I see the flip side as, and this was huge for me, Emily. Do you remember? Like, I'll give you just a little context for what the solution is. Do you remember how, like, in the height of the pandemic, I think you and I did a bunch of Facebook Live swaps together. Like, I went on Facebook Live like every single day for 6 weeks.
Yeah, I
Right?
remember.
And first of all, I burnt myself out. It was way too intense. That was not sustainable. But I discovered something, right? In terms of, I'm going to share the solution in a second. I was way too focused on, oh my gosh, here's how you put a paid program together. Here's how you put your modules together. Here's how you put your tech together. Here's how you do this and that. And I was way too into the instructive and teaching content. And then the shift that I made when that really didn't take me anywhere, Emily, can you imagine like all that time, all that effort that went into putting that live content together and actually going live really didn't result in anything for my bottom line.
Yeah, I think you said, so I'm in a challenge that Jessica's doing right now. And she told the story about a post she made that was like a great post, got so many likes, so many shares, so much engagement, and made you $0.
It did. It did.
And not that that's the goal of every post, but I think it was the goal of this post.
It was like I want to, I want to, help people. I want to create really good content. And yeah, the problem is when you're too instructive, when you're too into here's how you do this and that. So the way that you make the shift, here's how you solve that problem. Diagnose what's going on for someone. So for example, when you think about your ideal clients, you think about, okay, what are their biggest pains, fears, and frustrations? What are their biggest pains, fears, and frustrations as it relates to what I do in my business? And that does is that creates an opportunity for you to speak to, I know what's going on for you. I know what's going on. I know why trying to lose those 15 pounds is so hard. I know why trying to get that career change is so hard. I know why, I'm just trying to think of all the examples that I could think of, Emily. I know why it's so hard to have sales calls. I know why it's so hard to do this or that, right? Because when you do that, that's when you open up a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
That's when you grab their attention.
So when you're talking about like bringing, making that really simple and like almost formulaic for people, like how do you kind of say, all right, this is how you can structure it so that it's very simple and clear what you're touching on and also what you're talking about. And actually, I'm so guilty of asking 2 questions in one. I'm
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
My second question is, one thing that I see a lot is when people tap on those pain points, like, pretty aggressively, and then just sorta, like, leave them hanging there, you know? So it's like, "Yeah, I see you, I get you, you're bleeding on the floor, and I'm just gonna leave you there."
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm going to throw you in this pit and then
yeah.
I'm not going to give you any way to get out. Right. And so I think there's like 2 extremes. One, I think we're not connecting with pain or the pain points or frustrations at all, or we're not connecting emotionally at all. And I do see the other extreme where it's like, let me rub in salt, like let me rub that wound in salt and I'm just going to leave you there to suffer by yourself. I definitely see those 2 extremes. So I think to answer the first question, which is how do you keep this simple? I think the best thing to do is when you think of all your clients, right? When you think of, working with them, what are the things that are holding them back from success, right? I make a list, right? That's the way that I do this, right? Like, okay, so they're afraid to put themselves out there. They're afraid people will judge them. They're afraid of this and that. So I write that list. And then the other thing that I do is I just think of how can I connect this to what is going on in my everyday life? Right? How can I connect this to being a better storyteller? Those
Okay,
are
so
the things.
yeah, so we have this in common, and I truly believe that you can take almost any story and turn it into just about anything. And I'm gonna use a personal example. the other day I was talking to a business owner and she was saying that she's been in business for 10 years and she just has so much stuff. And she's like, some of it isn't even relevant. And I was like, actually,
Oh,
challenge you on that. And I was like, so I went through the next day and I also had a business that was completely unrelated to what I do now. I went through and I was able to turn a blog about mattresses into something about content. So I would venture to say that like you can pretty much turn any story. That salad you returned at the restaurant because it didn't come out the way that you ordered it,
yes.
that's content, you know? So I love that we have this in common. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, how do we take the ordinary, boring, and make it exciting?
Well, I think that's what's so exciting about putting content together. And that's why I think, for any of you who are watching this live or on replay, if you're like, I have nothing else to say. I don't have anything to talk about. I don't know how to talk about what it is that I do for people, right? Take the stories of your everyday life. So I think, is the question like, how do we do that? How do we make that
Yeah,
go?
yeah. I
Yeah.
think I genuinely think that it comes very naturally to some people. And it is not as natural, but it is a skill that you can learn. So yeah, I guess it's like what's underneath that skill.
Yeah. So I think it's just you the way that I do this, right? I'm just thinking like, how do I go about this, right? I just keep my clients' pains, fears, and frustrations always in the back of my mind. Like I know what they're going through. And then when like I stub my toe, I'm like, oh, what is this? What's going on here? Like I just get very meta about it. Like, how can
Mhm.
I connect this to something that my ideal client is going through? Because I think a lot of people wait, Emily, for the grand moments to happen, the car crash, the broken bone, the big pain, like loss that goes on in their life. They wait for those moments to feel like they have a story to tell. And people honestly care about what they're interested in. Like they care about the Nutter Butter that they bought at Trader Joe's. They care about the Netflix show that they just binged. And so you can take those moments that other people are doing, but people are too embarrassed to talk about. They're afraid that people are going to judge them or not think that they're this sophisticated business owner because they binged Inventing Anna over one weekend, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I create that bridge. So for example, what I do with a lot of clients is when they're like, well, I ask them, what's something boring that happened to you? And they're like, well, I ate too much whipped cream out of the refrigerator this weekend, and I'm kind of embarrassed about that.
Hey,
Like,
that's not that boring.
like who hasn't been there by binging in front of the refrigerator, right? They're just like, before you know it, you're like, oh no, how did that happen? I was like, okay, so what how does this relate to what your client is struggling with, right? And
Mhm.
so that's how I make that connection. And this was a sales coach I was talking to, and she was like, well, my clients often feel like um they do something wrong in their business and they don't know how to course correct, right? So when they make a mistake, they don't
Yeah.
know how to get back onto the right business habit train, or I'm thinking of like the healthy eating habit train, right? So how do you, when you make a mistake or do something wrong, how do you course correct in your business? And I was like, can you imagine just how much more exciting that post is going to sound when you're talking about whipped cream, or when you're speaking to an audience, or when you're teaching in your program and you've got this whipped cream story in your back pocket? Like,
Yeah.
that's what makes it so much clearer what it is that you do for people.
I was thinking of it in terms of content, like too much of a good thing can be bad,
There
right?
you go.
So Bet put in the chat, and I would love to kind of brainstorm with her if she's willing to go there. Bet,
Yeah.
feel free to pop in something boring that happened to you, and I think Jessica will turn in, but also tell us what you do.
Yeah, I was
Um,
just going to say, tell us what you do in your business, because then I
and
think,
we'll help you turn something boring into something interesting. But I think what Jessica's getting at here is really just kind of keeping those pain points of your customers and using whatever happens to you in your everyday life and just like directly tying it back in. Yeah.
well, and I think to go, just as we give Bet an opportunity to type into the chat, like this goes back into the question of like, what are the mistakes that we see entrepreneurs making with, content and communication? I think it's people are too focused on, let me solve your problem and let me tell you all these things that you need to be doing, instead of, let me create a connection with you. Let me develop a relationship with you. And let me do that through storytelling. And then that's when things become so much easier. That's when having conversations with people becomes easier. That's when it becomes easier to fill your programs and all of that, right? If you are someone who sells courses or programs.
Yep. Let's shift gears a little bit and start and talk a little bit about overcomplicating your process or
Mhm.
overcomplicating your product in general. Like, I know that a lot of people struggle to even describe what they do or how they do it. And so, how do you advise kind of like simplifying that a little bit for people?
What I usually say to people, like if we're just thinking about describing like what it is that you offer, I just say, think about this. What is it that someone's going to walk away with when they are done working with you? Whether it's one to one or whether it's in a group coaching capacity or whether it's, if they buy an online course, like what are they going to walk away with? Right. And I usually say you have to simplify that into like one or two things.
Hmm.
So if you and I, Emily, were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, I have this great program that I'm starting. The first thing that you were probably going to ask me, Emily, like, okay, so what do I get?
Right.
People are really not
What's
interested
in it? What's
in,
in it for me? I
yeah,
want
what's in it for me? Like, I want to know my time. I'm busy. Like, I've got, a lot of things pulling at my attention. So, what am I going to walk away with? How is this going to better my health, my business, whatever? And so, I usually challenge my clients to think of describing that in like one or two little bullet points. Then the temptation to say, like, well, over the 8 weeks, we're going to talk about this and this and this and this. And that's when you overcomplicate it.
Right, right. Okay. That makes total sense. We're gonna maybe come back right
Yeah.
back. We're gonna go back and forth. But Bet puts that she's a DIY crafter and she wants to build her brand other than products. Um, I guess we could just kind of because she didn't give us a boring example yet, but we could just kind of talk about what suggestions you might have, like off the top of your head. I'm thinking to myself, take that exact thing you just talked about, which is what am I going to get? Like as a person. So I'm a little unclear as to whether or not she's selling the products or the craft itself, but maybe you understand that better.
Yeah, it could be bet that you're a DIY crafter and you're selling your crafts. And I think one of the greatest things that you can do, like with a product specifically, is tell a story around that, like and create content around that. So you could think like, okay, I don't know what craft it is that you make, but you could like, let's just say it's, I don't know, pot holders or something. Like, when you have like a really hot pot and you put it onto the counter. I'm making this up completely, but
No, this is
um,
perfect.
like you make those and that's what people buy from you. Well, think about why would someone want to buy that from you? What's the inspiration for someone to say like, yes, I need this, right? What's their pain point, right? And so think of like them, I don't know, like cooking and they're busy or this or like I'm trying to think, Emily. Oh, she's
Okay,
selling clothes.
yeah, I got it. You're
Okay.
taking like I have one pot holder and I take instead of using the actual pot holder, I take like two rags and I use them to take the pan out of the oven. And half the time the rag is like a little damp because you just wiped the counter or whatever. And it's like, oh, there are lots of profanities, which then my husband does not enjoy that. So then it's like, it's a whole thing.
But here's so we could turn that into something. So the pain point is like you settle for using
Yes.
like old stuff.
Yeah.
That's the right. So you kind of talk this out. You're like, what is my ideal client doing, or what mistakes are they making, or what's the pain point for them? Right? They're
Yeah.
using these old rags, right? And so now I can speak to why are you settling for that? Like why you can get a little bit deep there, even if it's
Yeah.
just a little pot holder.
And like if it's lamps that she's selling, it's kind of like, okay, well, do you still have the lamp that you had in college? You know what I mean? Like, are you just collecting random things or are you intentionally choosing the decor in your home? So there's all sorts of, I mean, we don't even know what it is and we just came up with
We're just coming up with both, but I think you could think like, okay, so if my client is settling or they're tolerating like old things, like where can I think about in my personal life right now, separate from what I sell, like what is something that I'm tolerating that I shouldn't be tolerating?
yeah.
You're like, wow, I'm just selling a lamp. Like why do I need to get this deep? But that's the point, is you're creating this connection to someone because that's what they're doing.
Yeah. So, okay, so then jumping back to talking about our products and our services, it's really about putting that focus. And I am such a strong believer in this in everything that we do, visibility wise, is like we think that visibility and putting ourselves out there is like about us, and it is never about us. It is always about the person that we are making the connection with. I mean, we come into the equation as we're there to help them, but they are looking at it in what's in it for me. So I think answering that question before they even have time to ask is the key.
It is. And I think that's also, it's going to make you who you're watching this, it's going to make you feel so much more confident when you're talking about what you do, as opposed to, well, give me 15 minutes to explain this process to you and the person's gone,
Yeah.
right? Lead with what's in it for me. And that's going to be the shift when you're talking about and communicating what it is that you do for people.
Yeah. All right. I want to encourage people to put more questions in here. As you watch this on the replay, make sure you let us know that it's the replay. But Jessica, I also want you to share, if you don't mind, about what you have upcoming that people can get in on. And then also, I believe you and I are having a conversation next week. So maybe touching on what that entails.
Yeah, absolutely. So upcoming, I yet to set the date on that because I'm in the middle of running one now, but I'm going to be running another challenge. It's called 5 Days to Fill Your Feed, how to create 30 days worth of social media content to fill your offers. It's completely free. If you're interested in that, I would say the best thing to do is just friend me on Facebook, because I talk a lot about it there. So that's the easiest thing. So friend me on Facebook if you're like, I want to communicate my offers a little bit better. I want to take a look at my offers and what I'm actually positioning and make sure that I'm not, I'm either not posting at all, or I'm, not just spewing facts and information into the void. So that's one thing. And then Emily, you and I are going, this is why I want you all to connect with me on Facebook, because I'm bringing Emily onto my Facebook next week, Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to go live and we're going to have a conversation a little bit more in depth about how to turn your boring, lazy life into really compelling content.
Yeah, so bring your boring stories.
Yes. Well, the thing is, like, I think what's so great about the two of us is, like, I focus on content specifically for paid offers. Like, how do you use content to fill your offers? You talk about content in the broader scheme of, like, your brand and your visibility, and it's the bigger strategy piece. And you and I have such different ways that we can take content that I think if you attend this live next week, you're going to get so much out of it.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be fun. And I could talk about content literally all day long.
So. Yep. You and I voice memo back and forth. We're like, oh my gosh, this one thing happened and here's how I could turn it into content.
Yes. By the way, you have to watch the show Suspicion if you have not already seen it. I feel like it's your next thing.
Okay.
It's your next swindler show, if you will.
Oh
it's not real swindling. It's different, but okay. All right. That's all. Thank you all for who watched us live and who watched us on the replay. And when Jessica does launch that next round of her challenge, I highly encourage you to hop in there and join her. So I'll make sure that I share that in She Built This too. But as she said, just friend her on Facebook, and she posts really good content so you can like learn from the pro, and that way you can get in on whatever she has going on next.
And I can't wait for you to be live on my Facebook next week, and we're going to keep this content conversation going.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Thank you.